Hi everyone, Roxanne here from financerocks.com. Today I'm going to answer the question, how much money should be in my emergency fund? Now, if you watched my last video, you know that I keep 5 types of emergency funds. I'm going to go over in this video the prompts that I ask myself, the questions that I ask myself to determine how much to keep in each of those funds. This video is for you if you are reevaluating how much money should be in your emergency fund, or if you're just interested in how other people structure theirs. How much money should you have in your emergency fund? This is a question I get asked a lot, and I always tell people it is a very personal decision how much money to keep in your emergency funds. The amounts are really going to vary based on the type of industry that you're in, the type of job that you have, maybe the area that you're in. It's going to vary based on size of your family or whether or not you own a home. There's just a lot of factors that go into determining this. Even with the types of funds that you decide to keep, that should be customized to your personal needs as well as the actual dollar amounts. This is really just my framework that I go through to kind of help narrow that down and to try to figure out about how much I should keep. If you didn't watch my last video about the 5 types of emergency funds that I keep, I do recommend watching that first just to give you an idea of what each of these funds is for, the benefits of having a why statement behind each emergency fund. So let's get started going through each of the 5. If you want to run through this exercise yourself, you could either pause this video as I go through each prompt and answer the question, or you can copy the prompts out of the description and paste them into a Word document or Excel document and go through each on there. Fund number 1, the death fund. I break this up into 2 separate parts. For the first part, you'll want to ask yourself, what's the bare minimum amount of money for emergencies that you want to always keep no matter what? Who are the most important people in your life you want to be there for in life or death situations? What 3 emergencies are you and these loved ones most likely to experience? What is the estimated cost of each of these emergencies? Death Fund questions part 2. Who is going to pay for your end-of-life care and funeral costs? What is the average cost of a funeral in your area? I looked it up on Google, and for Montana, the average is about $7,000. How much, if any of these costs, do you want to leave money for? Once you've asked yourself these questions and gone through and come up with those scenarios that are most likely to happen, you'll want to look at the amounts that you set. If your current emergency funds are very low, you might want to start with the lowest of the numbers that you calculated, excluding 0. I say excluding 0 because some of the questions might not apply to you, so you might say none or 0. I'd say just go ahead and exclude those zeros and look at which is the lowest number from all those questions that you just answered. If you already have a substantial emergency fund, but you're looking to grow it, the other thing you could do is take the average or the highest number that you calculated and have that be your goal for your death fund. Let's go over the job loss fund prompts. In the case that income is lost, how many months would it take to find new income? Based on data from August 2019, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the average duration of unemployment was 22 weeks. This is going to vary based on your industry and how much demand there is for your skill sets. Most financial experts recommend having 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside in case of a job loss. And I agree that that seems about right for somewhere in that range is where we would fall. The second question is, what is your bare minimum cost of living for 1 month? Thinking through what would happen if an emergency did occur, we would be able to cut back on travel expenses, video games, restaurants, and other discretionary spending. Because we could cut back on those things, I do exclude those from our calculation. To calculate the job loss amount, the number of months from question 1 times the living expenses per month that was calculated in question 2, and have that be my goal for the job loss fund. Common shortage fund prompts. What's the annual out-of-pocket maximum for your health insurance? What's the cost of the cheapest car you would be willing to drive temporarily if your current vehicle breaks down? If you own your home, what are the 3 most likely replacements or repairs that you may need to make, and how much would each cost? If you rent, What is the average deposit you would need in your area to get a new place if you needed to move and your current landlord was slow to return your deposit? So to calculate the amount you need for common shortages, you could do two things. You could take the lowest of any of the numbers you just calculated, or you could take the average or highest number from the questions that you just answered. Prompts for the minimum balance fund. What is the bare minimum you always want to have in your checking account to prevent bounced checks and overdraft charges? What is the biggest payment you make each month? For most people, this is rent or mortgage. Do I want to keep a full month worth of expenses in checking so that I can avoid weekly budgeting? To calculate the minimum balance fund, you do the same thing. You can pick the lowest of the amounts, average or highest. I actually went right in the order of those questions. I started with $100 minimum, moved that to my largest payment once I had enough money to save that up, and then moved that up again to 1 month's worth of expenses. Paper cash fund prompts. What 3 scenarios are most likely to result in power outages in your area? Floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, winter storms. How long does it typically take to restore power afterwards? Then you can multiply this by your regular expenses that you estimated earlier. Now, I also keep this fund for identity theft. According to Credit Karma, it takes somewhere between 1 day and 1 month to resolve most identity theft issues. To calculate your paper cash amount, it's going to be what you feel most comfortable with, so you can take any of the amounts from the prompts. I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed going over these 5 types of funds. You really can start small and then build it as you go. When I first decided how much to keep, I started with $950 in the death fund and no other amounts for emergency funds at all, so just $950. There's really 2 different ways to approach this. You can either start with one, fill that to the amount that you want, and then go on to the other types of funds, funding them one at a time, or you can start with a little bit in each and then grow them all at the same time as you go. So 14 years after I started this emergency fund, plus husband, plus house, our current emergency fund amounts are $10,000 for the death fund, $6,000 for a job loss fund, which for us is 4 months of our bare minimum living expenses, $5,000 for our common shortage fund, which is my health insurance out-of-pocket maximum for the year, $1,500 for our minimum balance fund, which is 1 month of our bare minimum expenses, and then $1,000 of paper cash. That means we keep a total of $23,500 of emergency funds. Now, if that seems like a lot to you, or if the number that you calculate seems really high or really low, I recommend doing a little reasonableness check. So most financial experts recommend 3 to 6 months of living expenses as an emergency fund. I haven't heard anybody say that that's a bare minimum number. I think that they typically recommend just taking the average of your last 3 to 6 months and then using that to calculate it. So you can calculate that same number, just your regular expenses, and multiply that out to see where you fall. So for us, that means that we would need between $9,999 at 3 months of our regular living expenses, up to $19,998. Which would be 6 months of our spending. We spend on average $40,000 per year. If the range is 19 and we're at 23, we are keeping a little bit more than what most financial experts recommend, but it's not outrageous. It's not like twice as much as what they recommend. So we're pretty comfortable with that number. Now, if you crunch these numbers and you're very low or very high, then you can go back through, look at your questions again, and see if there were any that you were overestimating or underestimating, and you can adjust it from there. Now, you might be wondering, what's the point of calculating all of these questions and going through all these scenarios if I could just use the 3 to 6 months of expenses? And the reason is that going through each of these prompts, each of these different funds, and deciding how much you want to keep for each is how you make your emergency fund very specific. You know, you can say I need 3 to 6 months worth of emergency funds for emergencies, or you can say I need $950 in case my brother has a head injury from skateboarding and I need to go to Seattle. Really, the more specific that you can be with each of these prompts, the better off you're going to be for saving and keeping that money. because that scenario or those scenarios are going to pop into your head when you think about either quitting if you are trying to save and feeling discouraged, or if you feel tempted to access that money after you have saved it for reasons that aren't those specific reasons that you identified. So I hope that that gives you some direction as you're trying to figure out how much to keep in your emergency funds. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and I will try to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to subscribe or like this video, I always appreciate that. And until next time, I hope your emergency funds rock. Oh, that kind of looks weird. Hopefully this isn't too distracting. You're getting sleepy. You're gonna save all of your money. Repeat after me. I'll save all of my money.